They said the pain simulator could break an empire without firing a single shot. Whole civilizations had fallen to its song of agony. But that day, the song met a note it couldn't reach. His name was Cole Ward, and he was human. In the hollow silence of the Xyther Dominion's research citadel, pain had become a science. Metal corridors glowed with sterile blue light, humming with the pulse of containment fields. Every sound was measured, every heartbeat recorded. The Dominion didn't need armies anymore, not when they could unmake a mind. They called it the simulator, a device that interfaced with the nervous system, turning sensation into obedience. It didn't bruise. It didn't bleed. It simply taught surrender. The Xyther had used it to end rebellions, to carve empires out of resistance. They believed fear was the final truth of all sentient life, until the humans came. The chamber hissed open, releasing a thin veil of vapor. A single figure was dragged inside. Tall, broad-shouldered, his face marked with the dust of war. His wrists were bound in light restraints, but his gaze was unshaken. Sergeant Cole Ward, last survivor of the Terran 8th Expeditionary Unit, captured during the fall of Orion's Gate. A dozen Xyther scientists surrounded the platform, their translucent eyes glimmering like liquid glass. Their lead, Dr. Xarthan, adjusted her translator node and spoke with clinical precision. Subject, human, objective, determine fear threshold. Cole lifted his head. His lips curved slightly, not in defiance, not in madness, but in something worse. Amusement. The machine activated. A low hum vibrated through the air, the kind that crawls under the skin. The chamber filled with soundless pressure like gravity had decided to breathe. Electrodes snaked across Cole's temples, connecting him to a lattice of light. Pain surged. It wasn't fire. It wasn't knives. It was a signal, a perfect translation of suffering, encoded directly into his nervous system. Every cell screamed in harmony. For most species, that's when the mind shatters. Cole exhaled slowly, as though testing the warmth of a sauna. His jaw tightened, not in agony, but mild irritation. "This it?" he muttered. "I've had worse hangovers." The observers froze. Readings spiked, not his pain level, but theirs. Xyther physiology responded empathetically. Their nervous systems echoed the sensations of others. For a flicker of a moment, they felt the simulator's heat and flinched. Dr. Xarthan leaned forward, her metallic crest tightening. "Amplify sequence," she ordered. "Level 2, the lights deepened to crimson. The hum became a low roar, resonating through bone and metal alike. Cole's muscles tensed. His breathing slowed. His eyes never left hers. He wasn't defying them. He was studying them. For the first time, she understood why her superiors warned that humans were dangerous. Not because they were strong, but because they didn't know when to stop. Minutes passed. The chamber temperature rose to lethal levels for most species. The machine pushed further into neural layers no test had ever survived. Cole's readings, blood pressure, pulse, synaptic response, should have collapsed into chaos. Instead, they stabilized. Xarthan's assistants exchanged quick glances, uncertainty flickering through their calm exterior. "This can't be right," one whispered. "No subject survives Phase 2. His cortical barrier isn't rejecting the signal. He's absorbing it." Cole's mouth twitched into a grin. "You know," he said, his voice steady through the distortion, "back home, we called this Monday. Laughter wasn't supposed to exist in that room. The Dominion scientists had spent decades turning pain into data, fear into obedience. But that sound, that small, careless laugh, broke something sacred in their illusion of control." Dr. Xarthan's claws flexed against the console. For the first time in her career, she felt something unfamiliar. Doubt. "Human," she said slowly. "Do you not understand what's happening to you?" Cole tilted his head, eyes narrowing as if confused by her confusion. "Oh, I do," he said. "You're trying to find my limit." "Thing is, we don't have one." The words hung in the air like a prophecy. Behind the mirrored walls, Dominion officers observed silently. Their armor gleamed, their expressions unreadable. But one leaned close to another and whispered, "He should be unconscious. He should be dead." The experiment continued. The simulator's core pulsed brighter, pushing into theoretical extremes. Each pulse mapped a new horizon of suffering, and still the human remained. At some point, even the machines hesitated. Their circuits trembled from overload warnings. The air smelled faintly of ozone and something else. Resolve. Shira spoke again, more to herself than her team. "How can a creature endure this without madness?" Cole's answer came between ragged breaths. "Maybe," he said, "we made peace with pain a long time ago. Maybe we stopped seeing it as punishment. It wasn't bravado. It was explanation, a quiet truth, delivered with the calm of experience. And somehow, that made it terrifying. One of the junior scientists, unable to look away, whispered, "He's adapting to the simulation." Shira's voice was cold. Impossible. But even she knew the word had lost meaning. On the console, the biometric chart was supposed to display rising panic indicators, heart rate spikes, cortisol floods, neural collapse. Instead, it flattened. The chart read as one word in their universal translation grid: bored. Silence filled the chamber. The kind of silence that humbles gods. Then Cole laughed again, not loud, not mocking, just quiet human laughter that didn't belong in a room built for screams. "Tell me something," he said, his tone conversational, almost kind. "This thing's it ever work on anyone who fights back?" Shira didn't answer. Couldn't. Outside, the Dominion officers argued in hushed tones. Some demanded his termination. Others whispered of potential, of studying him, cloning him, weaponizing whatever anomaly he represented. But Jira wasn't thinking of war or conquest anymore. She was thinking of meaning. How many lifetimes had her species avoided discomfort? How many times had they engineered pain out of existence, only to lose the strength it once gave them? Cole met her gaze again, and for the first time she didn't see an experiment. She saw a mirror. He spoke softly, almost gently. "You can measure fear all you want, but until you've earned your scars, you'll never understand us." The word struck deeper than any weapon. In that moment, Jira realized the Dominion hadn't created a machine that broke empires. They'd created one that revealed them. The lights dimmed. The simulator powered down, its core cooling with a slow metallic sigh. Cole hung motionless for a moment, eyes half closed, breath steady. Then, impossibly, he smiled. "Not bad," he murmured, "but you might want to turn it up next time." Dr. Jira stared through the glass as the restraints disengaged. The silence was unbearable, the silence of a truth too heavy for language. The Dominion had built a weapon to measure fear. But fear couldn't be measured in him. It had to bow. Outside the chamber, alarms flickered faintly. Somewhere in the upper command decks, a voice ordered the impossible: "Increase intensity to maximum." Dr. Shira didn't protest. She only whispered to herself, eyes never leaving the human. If this is what he endures at level 2, what happens when pain itself breaks? The chamber pulsed like a living heart, mechanical, unfeeling, yet hungry. And within it, one man refused to break. Each surge of agony was supposed to erase him. Yet every pulse only made him more alive. They had designed the pain simulator to measure endurance, not will. Pain, to the zither, was a mathematical function: stimulus, reaction, collapse. They had tested hundreds of species before the humans arrived. Every one of them screamed, then begged, then dissolved into the quiet mercy of death. The readouts were predictable. Graphs peaked, then flatlined. But the human changed the equation. Sergeant Cole Ward sat restrained against the obsidian arc of the chamber wall. Veins bulged under pale skin. Sweat streamed in rivulets across his jaw. Yet his eyes, his damned eyes, gleamed with something alien to them: amusement. The alien technicians watched from behind the glass, their thin, silvered tendrils coiling with agitation. Readouts were flashing warning hues. Neural activity had surpassed survivable limits. Tissue degradation should have begun, but the human's vitals stabilized. Increase it. ordered Dr. Xira, her voice trembling between scientific precision and disbelief. The machine obeyed, a low hum swelling to a growl. Electric arcs chased one another across the curved walls. The scent of ozone filled the air. Cole's back arched. His teeth clenched. And then, through the storm of sensation, he laughed. Not a hysterical laugh. Not a broken one. It was soft. Calm. Defiant. Shira's second-in-command recoiled. He mocks us, but she didn't answer. Because she was watching something far deeper unfold. Something she couldn't classify. Inside the chamber, Cole's consciousness flickered like a storm light. He wasn't here anymore, not fully. Every pulse of pain dragged him backward through time, through the Arctic winds that tore across his training camp, through the dry crack of bone during endurance drills, through the long red horizon of Mars, where oxygen ran out faster than orders came in. He had lived pain long before machines could define it. Pain is not suffering, he thought. Pain is proof you're still here. The alien monitors struggled to interpret the human's brainwave pattern. Neural storms flashed across hemispheres, but they didn't correlate to fear. Instead, they resembled the electrical rhythm of meditation or prayer. He's adapting, Xira murmured, eyes narrowing. His mind isn't rejecting pain, it's learning from it. A murmur spread among the technicians. Adaptation, at this scale, defied biology. Pain was meant to disable, not to evolve. Cole's breathing steadied. The chamber glowed red, then dimmed. Through cracked lips, he whispered, almost conversationally, "Is that all you've got?" The words froze them. No scream, no plea, just a challenge. For the Zither, whose empire was built upon absolute control, this was sacrilege. Shira stepped closer to the glass. "Human," she said through the translator array, "you should be in collapse. Why resist? What is your limit?" Cole lifted his head, blood tracing a line from his ear to his collarbone. His gaze found her, piercing through layers of glass and gravity alike. "You're asking the wrong question," he said. "It's not about limits. It's about reasons," the translator stuttered, almost refusing to process the concept. Reasons, meaning, purpose. These were not quantifiable in the Xarthan lexicon. "What reason?" she asked, genuinely curious. Cole inhaled, slow and ragged. "Because I've seen worse. Because pain means I'm not done yet." The room fell into silence. Even the hum of machinery seemed to hesitate. Outside the chamber, the observation deck was crowded with scholars and tacticians. Their society revered intellect and domination. But emotion. Emotion was considered a primitive residue of evolution. And yet, this human's emotion was rewriting their understanding of endurance entirely. One technician whispered, "He's transcending stimulus response, entering a conscious override loop." But Xira wasn't listening anymore. She was feeling something. A quiet pull, a whisper of recognition, in her own chest. Something she hadn't felt since her species. Purged empathy from their neural architecture centuries. Ago curiosity, awe, respect. She leaned closer to the glass. "Cole Ward," she said softly, as though speaking his name might unlock the mystery. "You feel pain, and yet you resist. Is that what makes humans strong?" He chuckled. "No, it's what makes us human." And then the machine faltered. The systems registered thermal spikes, molecular instability, quantum misalignment, all meaningless compared to the reality before them. The pain simulator, a device built to crush the psyche of lesser species, was cracking. The alien engineers panicked. "Power feedback loop containment breach imminent." "Hold it!" Xira snapped, eyes still fixed on Cole. "I need to see how far he goes." Through the haze, Cole's vision blurred into light. Every nerve screamed, every cell burned. But beneath the chaos was a calm, ancient, and unmoving, like the heartbeat of Earth itself. He saw flashes, his unit laughing in the barracks, his mother's hands tightening his combat straps before deployment. The cold silence of orbit when he first saw home fade into a blue dot. He remembered why he endured. Not for glory, not for victory, but because someone had to stand when everyone else fell. And in that realization, the pain transformed. Not into comfort, not into numbness, but into clarity. Outside, the aliens watched the human's vitals climb beyond measurable limits. His body should have disintegrated. Instead, neural patterns synchronized into perfect rhythm, a harmonic stability unseen in any living organism. Shira's hand trembled over the console. "What are you becoming?" she whispered. Cole smiled faintly, eyes half open. "Just human." Then the system exploded, not in fire but in light. The chamber's walls folded inward, energy collapsing like a dying star. The shockwave rippled through the observatory, throwing zither scientists to the floor. Monitors shattered, alarms blared. When the light finally dimmed, the human was still there. Alive, barely breathing. Skin scorched, yet conscious, he looked up. And his eyes, dull moments ago, now gleamed with something far beyond defiance. Understanding. Shira rose shakily, her throat dry. She could not reconcile the data. The experiment had failed, or perhaps succeeded in ways beyond their grasp. For the first time in her life, she turned off the monitors. She didn't want readings. She wanted meaning. She approached the containment window. "Human," she said softly, her tone stripped of authority. "What does pain mean to you?" Cole tilted his head, his smile faint but real. "Pain's just the universe checking if we're still paying attention." The words struck her like gravity. They didn't belong to any equation, yet they anchored something inside her she didn't know was drifting. She dismissed her aides, alone now with the silent, breathing enigma before her. Her own pulse quickened, not from fear but revelation. This human had endured what no being should, and somehow he had turned suffering into wisdom. Perhaps the universe hadn't built humanity for domination, she thought. Perhaps it built them for understanding. She leaned closer, whispering as though to herself, "Maybe." "We measured the wrong thing." Cole closed his eyes. "Then start measuring why we keep standing." And with that, the machines fell silent. In the sterile quiet that followed, Dr. Shira stood alone, staring at the battered human who refused to yield. Her hands, once steady in the pursuit of precision, now trembled with something terrifyingly new, empathy. And as the lights dimmed around the broken chamber, she knew the experiment wasn't over. It had just begun. In the stillness that followed destruction, the hum of machines became a heartbeat. And within that heartbeat, something shifted. Not in the human, but in the alien who watched him. For the first time in her life, Dr. Shira began to wonder if understanding was more dangerous than pain itself. Days passed, or perhaps weeks. Time was difficult to measure in the sterile glow of the containment wing. Cole Ward lay in recovery, though recovery was too human a word for what the zither intended. He wasn't being healed, merely observed. Studied like a biological paradox, his body bore the scars of the simulator's fury. Yet beneath the burns, the bruises, the torn fibers of flesh, something alive pulsed, a rhythm that refused extinction. Dr. Zira watched in silence. Her colleagues filed reports filled with equations, thresholds, and neural aberrations, but she had begun to write something different in her private notes. Questions. Why didn't he yield? Why did pain strengthen him instead of breaking him? Why did his eyes still hold that terrible, unshakable calm? At first, she observed from behind glass, but curiosity is a contagion, and soon curiosity led her closer. Cole noticed her before she spoke. Humans had that sense, that awareness of being seen. "Back for round 2, Doc?" His voice was hoarse but light, like laughter surviving inside exhaustion. She flinched at the sound. "You should not be conscious. The treatment cycle was—" "Yeah," he interrupted. "I get that a lot." She hesitated. There was no malice in his tone, only the casual defiance of someone who'd seen worse than interrogation rooms. Shira finally asked, "Why do you smile?" Even now, Cole shrugged weakly, wincing as movement stretched half-healed muscles. "Because I'm alive." "You ever notice how being alive hurts sometimes?" The translator stumbled over his phrasing. The word hurts didn't fit neatly in Xarthan syntax. Their species didn't associate survival with discomfort. To them, pain was error, weakness, something to eradicate. To him, it was evidence. "You misunderstand," she said softly. "Pain means the system is failing." He turned his head toward her, eyes like molten steel under half-shuttered lids. "No, Doc. Pain means the system's trying. It's the body saying it hasn't given up yet." She fell silent. The logic was absurd, but strangely beautiful. In the following days, she began visiting more often. Not as a scientist, not entirely. Sometimes she would bring data pads and pretend to record his vitals. Other times, she simply asked questions. Why do humans climb mountains? To see what's on top. But you risk death. That's kind of the point. Why do your kind run until collapse? Because the finish line feels better when you've bled for it. Each answer unsettled her. Each word cracked a small fracture in the wall of certainty she'd built her life upon. Her people had conquered entire systems through intellect and control. They engineered existence to eliminate discomfort. And yet here sat a creature who had turned suffering into art, who grew through pain like fire through oxygen. One day she asked the question that haunted her most. "Tell me about your wars." Cole's face darkened, and for a long time he said nothing. Then, with a quiet that felt like respect, he began to speak. He told her about mud-thick trenches under alien suns, about brothers and sisters he'd buried in silence because there wasn't time for grief. He spoke of the Arctic drills, where skin froze and minds fractured, but the mission always came first. He spoke of civilians who refused evacuation, choosing to die on their feet rather than kneel before fear. Shira listened, transfixed. These stories weren't of cruelty. They were of endurance. Each moment of pain wasn't destruction. It was instruction. She began recording his words not for research, but for remembrance. Then came the day when he asked her a question. "Hey, Doc," he said, voice calm. "What about you? You ever earn your strength?" She blinked. "Earn it?" He nodded. "Yeah, fight for it. Suffer for it." The question landed like a tremor in her chest. In her world, strength was a given, born, not built. Pain was filtered out genetically before her kind even reached maturity. She had never struggled, never broken, never earned. "I was designed strong," she said carefully. Cole smiled faintly. "That's not the same thing. That night she didn't sleep." His words replayed in her mind. Earned strength. What did that mean for a species that had outgrown struggle? Were they strong? Or just untested? Her hands trembled as she reviewed the experiment footage again and again. She watched Cole screaming, laughing, enduring. And for the first time, she didn't see a subject. She saw a mirror. Because if pain truly revealed what someone was made of, then what did it say about a race that ran from it? Over the next cycles, she began altering his observation schedule, dismissing her assistants, locking the lab with personal codes. Cole noticed the change. "You hiding something?" he teased. She ignored the question, though her composure faltered. "I need to understand," she whispered. "Why doesn't pain destroy you?" He tilted his head. "Because we made peace with it a long time ago." "How?" "By listening," he said simply. "Pain's a language. You just have to learn what it's saying." She frowned. "A language of suffering?" "No," Cole corrected. "A language of endurance. It tells you what still matters." Silence hung between them, thick, alive. In that silence, Xira realized something terrifying. She could feel the truth of his words inside herself. For all her genetic perfection, she felt hollow. For all her civilization's knowledge, she felt ignorant. And in the quiet pulse of his heartbeat through the monitors, she envied the human capacity to hurt because they made meaning out of it. That envy became obsession. She began secretly modifying the pain simulator's control sequences. Not for another test, or not yet, but to study the threshold between agony and adaptation. Every adjustment felt like a betrayal of her people. Every new line of code, a step deeper into forbidden empathy. And yet she couldn't stop. Because somewhere between observation and conversation, the experiment had inverted. She was no longer the scientist. She was the student. And the human, her prisoner, had become the teacher. When she next entered the chamber, Cole sensed the tension. "You look like someone about to do something reckless," he said. "I need to know," she confessed quietly. "What happens beyond pain?" He stared at her, long and hard, then sighed. "You sure you're ready to find out?" She didn't answer, but her trembling hands hovering over the console said enough. Alarms hummed as she overrode every safety lock. The simulator roared to life, brighter, stronger, angrier than before. Cole's restraints clicked into place, and the hum grew into a low, pulsing thunder. Shira stepped closer, voice low and desperate. "If you survive this, I will finally understand." Cole gave her a faint smile. "Then listen closely, Doc. This part's not about data. It's about faith." The chamber ignited with white fire. Energy cascaded around him in violent arcs. The monitors screamed warnings. Yet through it all, his breathing stayed calm, steady, almost serene. Inside that storm, Shira saw something her mind couldn't compute: transformation. Not of body, but of being. Cole didn't fight the pain this time. He welcomed it. And as the energy reached levels that should have erased him from existence, his voice cut through the chaos, quiet but undeniable. "This," he said, "is the language you've been trying to read." She stood frozen, tears she didn't know she could cry tracing down alien skin. And for the first time in Zither history, one of them felt human. When the lights dimmed and the chamber fell silent, Shira stood trembling before the glass. In chasing knowledge, she had found something greater: humility. And as Cole's silhouette lingered in the fading glow, she whispered to herself, "What lies beyond pain?" "Might just be understanding." The chamber screamed, metal warped and lights bled into chaos. Cole was no longer a man strapped to a table. He was a storm learning to breathe. The simulator's walls pulsed like the veins of a god waking from sleep. Every cable trembled under the weight of its own current. The Dominion engineers had fled the observation decks hours ago. Only Dr. Shira remained, her silhouette carved against the inferno of holographic readouts. Numbers were dissolving. Limits were no longer limits, and at the heart of that chaos, Cole stood. The human subject. The anomaly. The one the Xarthan had once labeled biologically insufficient. He was supposed to break by now. They all were, but instead of screams, there was laughter, low, guttural, defiant. The kind of laughter that doesn't mock pain, but claims it. Each convulsion that ripped through his body didn't destroy him. It sculpted him. His skin shimmered with residual plasma. Veins glowed like threads of molten copper. Pain had become language, and he spoke it fluently. Dr. Shira could barely look away. Her instruments read catastrophic failure, neural overload, cardiac destabilization, structural tearing at a cellular level. Yet somehow, his mind was synchronizing with the machine's rhythm. Where the simulator devoured energy, Cole gave it more. It wasn't endurance anymore. It was fusion. The machine had been designed to test thresholds, not to redefine them. Yet that's what humanity always did, didn't it? Break rules that were never supposed to bend. Cole's consciousness began to drift beyond the chamber. He saw visions, not hallucinations, but echoes of every story humanity had ever told itself through pain. He saw soldiers holding the line under alien suns. He saw miners choking on Martian dust, whispering lullabies to themselves. He saw mothers giving birth in dimly lit shelters, clutching life even as the world crumbled. He saw explorers frozen on nameless worlds, staring at dying stars and still smiling. Every moment of suffering carved into the collective memory of humankind became fuel. And within that torrent, a truth formed, not of theology or design, but of identity. Pain is temporary. Defiance is forever. His pulse synchronized with the simulator's hum, and the chamber responded. Metal restraints melted into liquid light. The air thickened with something that wasn't plasma or gravity. It was will. Outside the observation dome, alarms howled across the Dominion research fleet. Ships in orbit began to destabilize, their instruments registering impossible readings, gravitational inversion, energy spikes beyond stellar output, and something more terrifying: synchronization with human neural patterns. Cole was rewriting the rules of reality with the only tool evolution had ever truly given him: endurance. Shira fell to her knees, watching the impossible unfold. "Stop it!" a voice barked through her communicator. "You'll kill him!" Her eyes were wet, her voice trembling, yet calm. "He's not dying. He's becoming." Cole's heartbeat echoed through the walls like a drumbeat of creation. Every pulse sent shockwaves that made the air shimmer. And then silence. The simulator shut down. The energy readings vanished. Smoke curled lazily in the stillness. When Jira stepped inside, the restraints had disintegrated into ash. The metallic floor beneath her boots was scorched with spiral marks, like a celestial fingerprint. At the center of it stood Cole. His body was human, but no longer fragile. He was calm, his chest rising with measured breaths, eyes glowing faintly with residual energy. When he looked at her, Jira felt both awe and dread, the primal realization that she stood before something that had walked out of myth and into reality. He smiled, faint but deliberate. "You built a God-forging machine," he said softly, voice carrying through the ruined chamber, "and you aimed it at a human." Her hands trembled. "What are you now?" He stepped forward. The floor tremored beneath his bare feet. "Exactly what you feared, Doctor. Proof that endurance can evolve." The word proof hung heavy in the air, not as threat, but as revelation. Outside, the Dominion fleet was in disarray. Their communication grids flickered, as if an unseen frequency was threading through every signal. The higher councils were already convening emergency sessions, debating whether the experiment had unleashed a weapon or a warning. Cole didn't move to escape. He didn't need to. Freedom wasn't physical anymore. It was philosophical. Shira stood there, unable to decide if she had created a monster or witnessed an awakening. Cole looked toward the chamber's shattered viewport, where the pale glow of a distant star bled across the metal. His voice dropped to a near whisper. "You see it now, don't you? Pain was never the curse. It was the forge. Every species runs from it. Humanity. We build empires inside it." He touched the wall. Molten alloy reformed beneath his fingertips. "This isn't power," he continued. "It's memory crystallized in motion. Every tear, every wound, every loss, it becomes architecture. The architecture of what we are." For the first time in her life, Dr. Shira, the cold architect of experimental suffering, felt small. Not intellectually, but spiritually. The kind of smallness that comes from realizing your species may have mistaken arrogance for advancement. The Dominion had sought to measure humanity's limits. But limits were never what humans obeyed. They were what humans transcended. Cole turned back toward her, voice firm now, carrying weight beyond his own. "Tell your people," he said. "We don't worship pain. We learn from it. That's what separates creation from cruelty." And then he walked past her, his footsteps echoing like quiet thunder. Every system in the facility rebooted. Every alien eye turned to the monitors, watching the human anomaly leave the chamber unbound. To them, he was proof that biology could be redefined. To her, he was a question she could never unask. And somewhere in the silence that followed, the simulator, the machine that was meant to destroy, pulsed once, faintly, as if bowing to its own creation. As Cole vanished into the light of the Dominion corridor, his shadow lingered on the walls, long, defiant, human. Shira stood frozen, her reflection trembling in the glass. She wasn't looking at a subject anymore. She was looking at a teacher, and the next chapter would decide whether she followed the lesson or buried it forever. The stars were older now. Their light moved slower, their warmth dimmer, yet the universe still whispered, a song no one remembered writing. Somewhere within that cosmic hum, a signal pulsed. Faint, deliberate, and human. Eons had passed since the fall of the Zither Dominion. Their crystal cities had crumbled into dust, their archives silenced beneath nebular storms. Civilizations rose and vanished, each leaving behind monuments that glowed for a while before being swallowed by time. But the signal remained. Across the cold expanse between galaxies, it drifted, a lattice of radiation patterns encoded in ways no natural star could reproduce. Long after the machines that birthed it had been dismantled, long after memory had dissolved into myth, something in the deep black kept talking. The explorers of that new age called themselves the Orcs Collective, beings of light and logic, their consciousness stored in mirrored shells of living metal. They were patient, timeless, and curious in ways only those without mortality could afford to be. For millennia, they mapped the remnants of extinct species, cataloging bones, ruins, and whispers. But when they found the human frequency, they stopped. The readings defied every known classification. Not a beacon, not a distress call, just persistence. At first, they dismissed it as background noise, another remnant of stellar radiation. But when the collective's archivists slowed the pattern to a perceptible range, they heard something structured, intentional, rhythmic. One of them, archivist Xarthan, described it best. It feels like heartbeat residue, as if something once alive refused to stop existing. So they listened closer, and beneath the static, beneath the quantum noise, a voice emerged, faint, ancient, and steady. "We are what we overcome." The Orcs researchers froze. The phrase repeated, carried by photons older than their species. Each repetition warped slightly, as if time itself were reverberating the memory of the words. They analyzed it in every known frequency. No source, no origin, only direction, outward. The message wasn't bound to a system. It was expanding, endlessly, as if woven into the background radiation of the cosmos itself. "Who speaks?" one of them whispered across their shared neural network. No one answered, but in that moment, every being present felt it. A flicker of something neither logic nor light could define. A resonance that wasn't data, but intention. It was humanity, not as flesh, not as form, but as pattern. As persistence made eternal, the Orcs Collective had spent ages erasing pain from their existence. Their creators had designed them to be efficient, calm, and detached from the chaos of organic emotion. Yet here, in a voice older than the galaxies around them, they encountered something their perfection had cost them: struggle. And they realized, with a kind of quiet awe, that the echo they were hearing was not a message to decode. It was a mirror. Xarthan stood before the projection, light cascading through his metallic form like ripples on water. "They didn't die," he said softly, voice trembling in frequencies that hadn't been used in eons. "They transformed." He played the signal again, slower this time. Each syllable carried fragments of humanity's past, laughter, weeping, the rhythm of footsteps through history. Somewhere in that noise were the whispers of soldiers, dreamers, mothers, inventors, all condensed into one persistent phrase, looping endlessly through time. "We are what we overcome." The words were both declaration and eulogy. Xarthan felt something impossible, the return of feeling. It was as if the echo itself rewrote the laws of their being, reawakening emotions buried deep within their architecture. In that instant, he understood what Cole had become. Not a man, not a god. A signal, the universe's first and final memory of endurance. The Orcs scientists began to trace the transmission's quantum structure. It wasn't random. It was alive. The pattern adapted to interference, rerouted through gravitational wells, used cosmic dust like circuitry. Each obstacle it encountered became part of its shape. Humanity had encoded itself in the only medium eternal enough to endure: entropy, struggle itself. The collective watched as the pulse of Cole's mind, his last resonance from that ancient experiment, traveled through black holes and quasars, carrying fragments of emotion through the silence. And wherever the signal touched, something subtle changed. Dead worlds sparked faint magnetic storms. Dormant systems awoke from hibernation. Unsentient code began to dream. The echo was rewriting existence, not through force, but through memory. Xarthan recorded his findings into the archive of all things, his metallic voice shaking. "The human did not conquer the universe. They became it. Their persistence folded into the background fabric, their will encoded into the hum of radiation that holds every atom together. They were never erased. They simply transcended the requirement of form. He paused, then added softly, "Perhaps this is what divinity was always meant to be, not power over creation, but endurance within it." The other Orison listened, silent, reflective. Across the void, the signal continued its eternal pulse, spreading through dark matter, into nebulae, into the quiet between galaxies. No one alive remembered Earth. No one remembered the zither, the simulator, or the fragile creature who once defied pain itself. But the message lived on, not as history but as law, a whisper built into the architecture of existence. And every time a new civilization rose, and every time one fell, the same faint frequency touched their instruments. A reminder that even at the cold edge of infinity, there was once a species that refused to vanish quietly. Cole's voice, now dispersed across creation, spoke not in command, but in memory. We are what we overcome. And for a moment, the stars themselves seemed to listen. Varen watched the galaxy's edge shimmer under the transmission's wavefront, and for the first time since his kind abandoned emotion, he smiled. Somewhere beyond the reach of time, beyond the need for bodies or language, the essence of humanity moved, not as conquerors, but as continuity. It existed in the supernova's last flash, in the breath between entropy and birth. In every attempt, every failure, every rise, every fall, the Orison Collective understood now. Life was never about perfection. It was about persistence, and in that persistence, there was immortality. The cosmos was not empty. It was alive, humming with the quiet defiance of those who had once dared to endure. And as the Orison departed the dying system, the echo followed them, faint but constant, threading through their every transmission. We are what we overcome. It no longer sounded like a recording. It sounded like truth. The light from the distant star faded, yet the signal remained, pulsing softly against the infinite dark. Not a plea, not a warning, just a heartbeat, endless, patient, human. And in that steady rhythm, the universe remembered.